Leclerc is today the second retailer in France. Carrefour is first. Hopefully in 2 years we'll be first. And only on one policy, price. We are well known for that in France since 60 years. We are the best in price, low margin and low price on every product and every day, not only 500 products sometimes. One thing has changed in France, and not only in France. Customers have changed. It's not fun anymore to go in the supermarket. And it's much more fun to stay at home and purchase on the web. But that's not great for our supermarkets. So we had to find something to say, hey, okay, we understand it's not fun to purchase a bottle of water or pasta, but it's still fun to purchase other things in the supermarket. So we tried to do a mix between the two, and we created 6 years ago the Drive, Leclerc Drive. Leclerc Drive is now approximately, it's not approximately, it's true, 320 drives in France. And the drive system in France has really exploded in the last 3 years. We find 2,000 drives in France in February. And, today we think we have found the good solution because we have 45% of the market of drives in France, which is today 40% of our growth in the year 2012. So, of course, something important for us. Drive is same price as supermarket, same price for the customer, but less products, only 6,000. Ordered on web, paid by credit card on web, and then after you put it in the trunk of the car when you want. It's easy and quite quick. And as retailers, we were used to security in our stores. Security in our stores for all the payments. Checks we were guaranteed, credit cards, thank you to also security. And when we discovered the web, hey, no more security. And after, we had to find a solution.
And you've recently, firstly, thank you, agreed to be an early adopter of V.me. So what's your rationale for seeing this as the solution?
Well, in fact, just to explain to you, just 2 minutes, the history. First, we tried 3D Secure. And just a little problem is the customer didn't find that great. And when we put it in the store, 3D Secure, on a drive, the drive who tested it lost 15 to 20% of their customers because the customer had to find, for some banks, a plastic card, for some banks, receiving an SMS, for some banks, receiving an email, for some banks, both card and SMS. And when you are on your PC at home, it's okay. But when you are in the bus with your smartphone, it's impossible. So really, we were losing customers with that solution. And when we presented, when the customers were trying to use 3D Secure, and they weren't happy with that, they were saying to us, hey, why don't you use PayPal? That's why I told you at the beginning that we work on low margin. It's because really we cannot afford PayPal if we want our economical model to work. So at that time, we have one chance. We have the Edelbank in our movement, Leclerc movement. And we work with Richard Pouillot on that point, and he came to us because we're only retailers, so we have good specialists. And he came towards us with the V.me solution. And he said, I think V.me was the thing we were waiting for, because it's simple. The customer will understand it, will be able to use it, as we saw that on your presentation. It's easy. And I was speaking with a colleague yesterday, telling him I was coming here today. He said, V.me, for him, he didn't know. And I explained to him what it was, and he said, okay, so it's PayPal, but Leclerc price. And I found that sentence really nice.
We won't use that in our advertising, if that's okay.
So that was, in fact, that's the point. That's why we chose V.me.
Ben, following on from that point, I mean, yesterday, the gentleman from Google talked about one simple, beautiful user experience. Mm-hmm. And I think following on from that point, and yet often we as a community are talking about the technology that kind of sits underneath it, whether it be NFC. Do you think the customer cares what technology sits under it, or do you think it is just about whatever that experience is?
For most of them, it's just about what the experience is. I mean, obviously, you have some customers that are very technically minded, and they do like to dig into the detail, but the vast majority of people, they just want it to be simple. They want it to be easy. They don't really care how it's done, as long as it's secure, it's reliable, and it doesn't cost them anything. But effectively, yes, they want a simple, easy experience, because companies like Apple and Google have taught them that things can be simple. So we expect things to be simple, and that's why simplicity is so important. It's just what customers expect. Eric, you wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, I think, experiencing the customer every day, we try to do wonderful things, etc. The customer, he wants only one thing. He's there to buy his products as quickly as possible. He has to find the products easy, and he has to find security. If you bring him something easy and secure, you've got the deal.
Yeah, I'd add to that. I mean, I spent a large part of my career optimizing checkout processes, and you can make the difference of 3-4% in terms of people who complete the sale based on the color of the button. The online environment is incredibly, incredibly sensitive to this, and mobile just exaggerates the problem, just makes it even more sensitive. So this is really real stuff. The beauty of it, you can test it, you can iterate, you can kind of refine it over time. But this is, I think people really underestimate the impact it has on sales. So very small changes in user experience. It's so critical.
One thing we really experienced in the last 18 months, the purchase of the food on our Leclerc Drive website is now 25% on mobile phone. And they purchase 42 items each time on the mobile phone. So, I mean, technology is okay for them when it brings them the possibility to buy their bottle when they are in the bus. And when these technologies are useful, it works.
And Duncan, to your earlier point, we probably need to adapt the thinking of what you need from a security standpoint to access your online banking system versus the convenience of checkout. Those things tend to blur sometimes our conversations, but they're very different, aren't they?
Yeah, you need to find that balance. So the consumer needs to have very little kind of conscious interaction during a payment. They need to just kind of get it done as quickly and as easily as possible. The more you interrupt that payment by making them think, as much as filling in forms, so just making them think, the more sales you'll lose. And so the established norms, there's a reason why username and password is kind of an established norm in the consumer's mind. That's kind of where we're starting with V.me. That's not where we will end. I believe that if step one is about essentially getting consumers onto V.me and getting merchants accepting V.me, step two, I think, will be the game in authentication. I think the next step change in user experience, once you've got the payment credentials essentially in the cloud, is constant improvements on authentication and making it easier while still protecting that kind of security promise.
That's a really interesting point, because the banks themselves have done exactly this with mobile banking. When most banks first launched mobile banking, again, it had username, password, quite complicated authentication. What a number of banks have done now is you just get straight into straight into mobile banking, and you can see your balances. Because actually, at that point, the fraud risk is quite low. If someone steals my phone, they can see my balance. It's embarrassing, but it's more annoying they've stolen my phone. Where the security and the authentication comes in is at the point of the transaction. And so I think the banks themselves have simplified access to online banking, and I think you're going to continue to iterate V.me to make it as simple as possible, because fundamentally you need to meet customers' needs, make it easy, and ideally make it enjoyable.
Now, Ben, you've been very kind in some of your comments in the past. Clearly, one of the key approaches to market for us is that this is seen as a solution provided by the banks to their customers, as opposed to a Visa-branded solution. Do you think that distribution approach is going to be important for the retailers and the community when you look at us versus myriads of wallets?
Eric can probably speak for the merchants better. I don't think the merchants really care who it comes from, as long as it's easy, secure, and reliable. Obviously, the fact that Visa is a huge global company, and the fact that it's coming from the banks is great. But if there was another system that was even better, even cheaper, that came from a trusted organization, I think the merchants wouldn't care. But
yeah. In fact, first it has to be simple. So the customer has to get his wallet for all banks. You can't imagine X wallets of X banks. We have one wallet proposed on the website. And then he has to be sure there will be no problem. So we have to, and that's why we chose Visa. It's because it's a well-known brand where you have security. So, okay, my bank, I'm sure. Another bank, I'm not sure. It's not my bank. But Visa is my credit card. I know it. So I'm sure there will not be a problem.
And Duncan, presumably from ensuring a consistency of customer experience, that will help, again, eliminate the...
Yeah, the trick here is to line up as many of the issuers with as many merchants sort of through the hub of the V.me button, right? And I'm sure merchants don't want to have 20 different buttons for 20 different wallets on their site, because that's a very critical page. So what V.me as a brand in its own right brings is that acceptance market, essentially. And then that connects through to the bank-issued wallet. All our research suggests that the combination of the bank brand, primarily sort of powered by Visa, scores far more strongly than any alternative in the consumer's mind in terms of relevance and security and sort of what they would expect to be using in an online environment.
Finally, I have one last question. Duncan, I've worked 25 years in the payment industry. I've never seen anything like the demand that we're seeing for this solution. At the same time, I'm seeing the range of services that are kind of being put in the development ask huge. How do we prioritize?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, demand is sort of coming out of our ears, if you like. Demand, we have a lot of demand, both from there is constant pressure on us to deliver new features and to finish, robustifying, making the product robust. There's demand within the markets we're live in. There's significant demand from the issuing, the acquiring community, and now retailers. And then, of course, there's demand for other countries for us to roll out in. So it's a difficult challenge. The way we're approaching it is we're focusing our development effort on finishing the core platform and getting the core user experience to a place where we think it can be scaled very, very quickly, like the process we showed you earlier, the express activation process, getting it to that kind of point. We're focusing our operational efforts on onboarding the demand that we have within markets today, and we're in the process of doing that, and I think we've ramped up very quickly to meet that demand. And then what we found with new countries is actually there's quite a lot of work that we have to do in a country before we deploy the technology. So whether that's dealing with the regulators to figure out how we can do authentication in that country, whether it's through to getting the bank and the acquirer's demands and figuring out how we will work with them in the most efficient way. So we found it's actually about a sort of 12-month lead time from starting deployment in the country before we really deploy the technology. So what we're doing is we're deploying a team of people to sort of develop the market and get them ready, if you like, so that we can drag and drop V.me into the market once the market is sort of ready for it. So we're trying to parallel run those three activities. But I think I'm always going to be challenged with how are we meeting this demand quickly enough, and I think I'll probably always be having this conversation for the next 2 or 3 years, actually.